I sat perfectly still in the pitch-black living room of a house that was not mine, draped in my twin sister's favorite silk robe. Heavy, arrogant footsteps echoed from the hallway, belonging to a man who firmly believed he had completely broken his wife, when his fingers dug into my shoulder, ordering me to look him straight in the eye. He expected utter terror. What he got instead was the mistake that ended his pathetic life. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Quinn Butler. I am 34 years old, and until tonight, I lived a relatively quiet life. That shattered at exactly 2 in the morning. The sharp ring of my phone sliced through the dead silence of my bedroom. The caller ID glowed with my twin sister's name, Maya. I swiped to answer, expecting a mundane late-night chat, but instead, I was met with the sound of hyperventilating and raw, uncontrolled sobbing. Maya? What is going on? I asked, sitting up instantly and tossing the heavy blankets aside. Quinn, you have to help me, she gasped, her voice trembling so violently I could barely make out the words. It is Vance. He is making me take these pills. They make me dizzy. They make me forget things. When I refuse, he corners me. He says no one will believe a crazy woman. Please, Quinn, I am so scared. The absolute terror in my sister's voice ignited a cold fire in my chest. Maya was always the gentle one, the brilliant but fragile soul who avoided conflict at all costs. To hear her reduced to this broken-up, panicked state meant things were far worse than she was saying. Vance Sterling, her arrogant husband, was a monster hiding behind expensive suits and corporate smiles. Pack a bag, I commanded, my voice flat and completely devoid of panic. Only the essentials. Do not let him see you packing. I am on my way right now. I threw on the first clothes I could find, grabbed my keys, and bolted out the door. The drive from Portland to Seattle usually takes around 3 hours, but that night, I drove like a demon fleeing hell. The dark highway blurred past my windshield as heavy rain lashed against the glass. My knuckles were stark white around the steering wheel. Every mile felt like an absolute eternity. I mapped out a plan in my head. I had a trusted colleague who owned an isolated cabin just outside the Seattle suburbs. It would be the perfect safe house. When I finally pulled up to their massive, ostentatious house, the neighborhood was completely dead. I slipped through the side gate and found Maya waiting in the garage, shivering in the cold, damp air. Seeing her under the harsh security light made my stomach drop. She looked so small, her skin pale and her eyes darting around like a hunted animal. I did not waste time with hugs or tears. I ushered her quickly into my car. We drove straight to the safe house on the outskirts of the city. Once she was secured behind locked doors with a cup of hot tea in her shaking hands, she begged me to stay with her. I will be right back, Maya, I told her softly, brushing her messy hair out of her face. But Vance needs to know he cannot just come home and find you gone without a message. I drove back to their house alone. The plan was simple, but the moment I stepped back into their grand foyer, the plan evolved into something much darker. I walked upstairs to Maya's bedroom. I found her favorite emerald green silk robe discarded on the bed. Maya and I are identical twins. We share the same face, the same height, the same dark hair, but we do not share the same spirit. She is a brilliant programmer. I run a high-threat private security firm. I stripped off my damp jacket and slipped the cold silk over my shoulders. I walked downstairs, turned off every single light, and sat down in the large leather armchair in the center of the living room. The darkness swallowed me completely. I sat perfectly still. I waited. The silence was absolute, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Almost an hour passed before the front door violently banged open. Heavy, sloppy footsteps stumbled over the threshold. Vance, the stench of stale whiskey and expensive cologne immediately flooded the room. He slammed the door shut, cursing loudly under his breath. He fumbled blindly in the dark, his anger palpable in the heavy air. "Maya!" he barked, his voice thick and slurred with alcohol. "Where are you hiding? You useless freak! Get out here right now!" I did not move a muscle. I let him stumble closer, his breathing ragged and furious. His eyes finally adjusted to the gloom, spotting the silhouette of the green silk robe in the chair. He let out a nasty, triumphant sneer. "There you are," he spat, lunging forward with sudden, terrifying speed. He reached out with both hands, his thick fingers curling like claws, aiming directly for my hair to drag me out of the chair. He expected a scream. He expected his fragile wife to cower and beg for mercy. He got me instead. The second his fingers brushed my hair, my reflexes took over. I exploded upwards from the chair. I grabbed his outstretched wrist with my left hand, twisting it violently outward while stepping firmly into his personal space. His drunken momentum carried him forward, completely off balance. I brought my right forearm up, smashing it hard against his throat, and used his own weight to sweep his legs out from under him. The impact was deafening. Vance hit the solid hardwood floor with a sickening thud, all the air rushing out of his lungs in a wet gasp, before he could even register the pain. I dropped my knee squarely onto his chest, pinning him down with bone-crushing force. I twisted his arm behind his back, locking his shoulder joint so tight that the slightest movement would snap it. He writhed in agony, his face twisted in confusion and sudden, blinding terror. He looked up, his bloodshot eyes finally focusing on my face in the dim light. He saw Maya's features, but he saw something entirely alien behind her eyes. He saw a predator. The drunken rage melted into absolute horror as his alcohol-soaked brain finally realized the catastrophic mistake he had just made. I leaned down until my lips were barely an inch from his ear. "Look at me very closely, Vance," I whispered, my voice dripping with pure, unadulterated venom. "Does it look like I am the woman you can break?" Vance did not even try to fight back. The moment I released the pressure on his shoulder, he scrambled backward like a pathetic insect scurrying away from the light. He practically tore the front door off its hinges as he bolted into the rainy night, leaving his expensive car behind in the driveway and fleeing down the street on foot. The metallic click of the door shutting behind him signaled the beginning of my real work. I did not waste a single second. I systematically moved through the dark house, sweeping every room with the cold precision my profession demanded. I bypassed the obvious spaces, ignoring the sprawling kitchen and the luxurious guest bedrooms, and went straight for his sanctuary, the home office. It was a disgustingly pretentious room, lined with unread leather-bound books and a massive mahogany desk sitting in the exact center of a plush Persian rug. It was a room built for a man who desperately wanted to feel important. I sat in his expensive leather chair and examined the desk. The main drawer was secured with a high-grade tumbler lock. It was a decent deterrent for a terrified spouse, but absolutely useless against a private security specialist. I pulled a small tension wrench and a standard pick from my pocket. It took me exactly 45 seconds to hear the satisfying click of the mechanism giving way. I pulled the heavy drawer open, fully expecting to find evidence of a sordid affair. Hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, maybe a second mobile phone. What I found was something infinitely more sinister, a betrayal so deep it made my stomach churn. Sitting right on top of a stack of legal pads were 2 identical bottles of Maya's daily nutritional supplements. I picked them up, my instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. I unscrewed the caps and poured a few capsules from each bottle into the palm of my hand. The capsules from the bottle he kept hidden in the back of the drawer were slightly chalkier, the powder inside a completely different shade of white. He had taken the time to empty her actual vitamins and refill the clear casings with something else. I recognized the distinct, bitter smell and the powdery texture. It was a potent, low-dose sedative often used in heavy psychiatric care. When taken daily, it would not knock a person out immediately. Instead, it would induce severe lethargy, chronic dizziness, auditory hallucinations, and massive gaps in short-term memory. Vance was not just verbally abusing my sister. He was systematically poisoning her mind. He was actively manufacturing a mental breakdown, turning his brilliant wife into a trembling shadow of herself. The burning question was why? Maya was the primary breadwinner, a genius software engineer who lived and breathed her work. Why break the golden goose? The answer lay at the bottom of the drawer. I pulled out a thick, unmarked black folder. Inside were dozens of pages of highly confidential technical schematics, legal blueprints, and patent transfer agreements. I scanned the documents, my blood turning to absolute ice. It was Maya's life work. She had spent the last 3 years developing a revolutionary artificial intelligence source code designed for predictive logistics and supply chain automation. It was a proprietary software worth tens of millions of dollars, and Vance was trying to steal every single line of it. I flipped through the dense legal jargon and found a finalized draft for a medical conservatorship. The sick, twisted puzzle pieces violently snapped together in my mind, forming a picture of unparalleled greed. If Maya had a documented mental breakdown, if she was deemed legally incompetent to manage her own affairs due to severe hallucinations and memory loss, Vance would become her sole legal guardian. He would gain absolute, unchecked control over her medical decisions, her personal finances, and most importantly, her intellectual property. He could sell her multi-million-dollar company right out from under her, and she would be locked away in a psychiatric ward, completely powerless to stop him. I dug deeper into the files and found a thick stack of printed electronic mail correspondences. Vance was not working alone. The emails were addressed to a woman named Sloan. She was listed as a senior acquisition director for a massive tech conglomerate. The messages between them were sickeningly casual, discussing the hostile takeover of my sister's life work like they were trading cheap baseball cards. I can guarantee the transfer will be finalized within 30 days. Vance had written in one of the printed messages, "My wife's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Her physician is already discussing permanent inpatient care. Once the conservatorship is granted by the state judge, I will sign the intellectual property rights over to your holding company for the agreed-upon $8 million. Sloan had replied merely 2 hours later, "Make sure her name is completely scrubbed from the final patent filing. We cannot afford any loose ends or legal challenges when the software goes public next quarter." A profound, dangerous rage settled deep into my bones. This was not a simple domestic dispute. This was a calculated, cold-blooded corporate assassination. I pulled out my mobile phone and began photographing every single piece of paper in that drawer. I captured the damning emails, the fraudulent legal drafts, the conservatorship paperwork, and crystal-clear images of the tampered pill capsules. I took exactly 120 high-resolution photos, ensuring every single word and forged signature was perfectly legible. I uploaded everything to a secure encrypted cloud server that only I possessed the decryption keys for. Once the digital backup was confirmed, I carefully placed the physical files back exactly as I had found them. I locked the mahogany drawer, wiped down the polished desk surface to remove my fingerprints, and erased any trace of my presence in the room. Vance thought he was an untouchable mastermind playing a flawless game of chess against a defenseless, medicated opponent. He had no idea that the board had just been violently flipped. I was going to tear his entire world apart, brick by arrogant brick, and I was going to make sure he felt every single moment of his own destruction. By 8 o'clock the next morning, my network of information brokers had delivered a complete dossier on Sloan. Her full name was Sloan Kensington, the Senior Acquisition Director for Zenithar Logistics, a massive supply chain conglomerate operating out of downtown Seattle. She was known in the corporate world as a ruthless closer, a woman who chewed up small tech startups and spat them out for pennies on the dollar. She thought she was the apex predator in this scenario. She had absolutely no idea she was swimming with a leviathan. Tracking her daily routine was remarkably simple. People with too much money and too much arrogance are creatures of expensive habits. Every Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Sloan dined alone at a Michelin-starred seafood restaurant overlooking the harbor, occupying the exact same secluded corner booth. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that screamed quiet, old money power. I adopted the persona of an independent venture capitalist looking to acquire emerging software. When Sloane finally walked in, she moved with the practiced swagger of someone who believed she owned the very ground she walked on. She ordered a glass of champagne that cost $200 and dismissed the waiter with a flick of her manicured hand. I gave her exactly 10 minutes to enjoy her own reflection in the window before I approached her table and slid into the leather booth directly across from her. "Excuse me," Sloane snapped, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "This booth is reserved, and I do not take unprompted pitches from desperate startup founders. Leave before I have security throw you onto the pavement." "I am not here to pitch you anything, Sloane," I replied smoothly, leaning back and crossing my legs. "I am here to save you from making the most humiliating and expensive mistake of your entire professional career." She let out a dry, condescending laugh. "Do you have any idea who I am? I manage acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I do not make mistakes." "You are making one right now," I countered, my voice low and dangerous. "You are banking your promotion to the executive board on a proprietary artificial intelligence source code you think you are buying from Vance Sterling. You think you are getting a massive steal, acquiring a piece of tech that will revolutionize Zenithar logistics for a mere fraction of its actual market value." The smug smile instantly vanished from her face. The glass of champagne stopped halfway to her lips. She set it down slowly, her eyes darting around the restaurant to ensure no one was listening. "Who the hell are you?" she hissed, the first crack of genuine panic showing in her perfectly sculpted facade. "I am a friend of the actual creator of that software," I said, "and I am someone who despises a greedy, two-timing liar. Vance has you convinced that he holds all the cards. He has you doing his dirty work, setting up the shell corporations and the shadow accounts. But you are not his partner. Sloane, you are just his temporary bankroll." I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a sleek manila envelope. I tossed it onto the pristine white tablecloth. "Open it," I commanded. Sloane hesitated for a fraction of a second before her curiosity overpowered her caution. She pulled out the top stack of documents. They were encrypted email transcripts and digital communication logs my team had intercepted just 4 hours ago. "While Vance is promising you exclusive rights to the logistics code," I explained, watching her eyes scan the pages, "he is actively negotiating with your two biggest competitors. You see those timestamps? Just last night, exactly 3 hours before he finalized his timeline with you, he offered the exact same source code to a firm in Silicon Valley for $2 million more than your agreed price. He is playing all three of you against each other. The moment your holding company wires the initial advance, he's going to take the highest bid from the rival firm, pack his bags, and disappear, leaving you to face the corporate fraud charges alone." Sloane's face turned a sickening shade of gray. The sharp, confident corporate shark was rapidly deflating. "This cannot be right," she whispered, her voice shaking. "We have an ironclad agreement. We have a personal understanding." "Ah," I said, a bitter smile crossing my face. "The personal understanding? You mean the romantic dinners? The late-night hotel rendezvous? The promises that once he is free from his burdensome, unstable wife, the two of you will take over the tech world together?" She flinched violently, confirming exactly what I had suspected. Vance was not just using her corporate connections, he was manipulating her emotionally to secure his own safety net. I reached back into the envelope and pulled out the final piece of the puzzle. It was a series of bank statements and credit card receipts, cross-referenced with high-resolution security footage from a luxury jeweler downtown. I laid the glossy photographs out in front of her like tarot cards predicting a disaster. "Tell me, Sloane," I asked softly, "did he ask you for a personal loan last month? Something around $50,000 to help cover legal fees for his wife's impending conservatorship?" Sloane swallowed hard, her eyes glued to the photos. She gave a single, stiff nod. "Look at the receipts," I told her. "He did not spend a single dime of your money on legal fees. He spent $45,000 on a custom diamond tennis bracelet and a pair of platinum earrings. He told me he was buying those for me," she stammered, desperately trying to salvage her pride. An early celebration gift for our acquisition. Really? I tapped the security footage photograph. It clearly showed Vance standing at the jewelry counter, wrapping his arms around a stunning 23-year-old blonde woman. She was wearing the exact diamond bracelet Sloan had just described. Because it looks like he gave your celebration gift to a local fitness instructor. He has been funding her luxury apartment rent with your corporate advance for the last 6 months. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the realization hit Sloan like a freight train. She had sacrificed her corporate integrity, risked her highly lucrative career, and compromised her own morals for a man who viewed her as nothing more than an easily manipulated cash register. The embarrassment morphed rapidly into a dark, suffocating rage. Her hands began to tremble, not out of fear, but out of pure, unadulterated fury. She slowly gathered the photographs and the email transcripts. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might shatter. He is scheduled to present the final build of the software to the entire Zenithar Logistics Executive Board this coming Friday, Sloan said, her voice now completely devoid of emotion. It was the voice of an executioner. He thinks he is going to walk out of that boardroom a god. Then we need to make sure he walks out in handcuffs, I replied, holding her gaze. I need your security clearances. I need the network schematics for the presentation room, and I need you to play the role of the adoring partner for just a few more days. Sloan looked down at the picture of Vance and the blonde girl one last time. Then, she looked up at me, her eyes burning with a vindictive fire. Tell me exactly what you need me to do, she said. The isolated cabin in the woods was bathed in the soft gray light of early morning when the heavy wooden door creaked open. Sloan stepped inside, shaking the damp chill from her expensive trench coat. She looked entirely out of place in the rustic living room, but her eyes carried a hardened, singular focus. Sitting across from her on the worn fabric sofa was Maya. My twin sister clutched a steaming mug of tea, her knuckles white. The air in the room was incredibly thick, suffocatingly tense. Here were two women who, under any normal circumstances, would be bitter enemies. One was the devoted, betrayed wife. The other was the ambitious, manipulated mistress. I stood by the stone fireplace, watching them carefully, ready to intervene if the fragile peace shattered. So, Sloan began, her voice tight, lacking its usual corporate bravado. She slowly took a seat in the armchair opposite Maya. You are the genius he tried to erase. Maya did not flinch. Just 12 hours ago, she was a trembling, terrified victim. But the moment I had shown her the photographs of the tampered pill capsules and explained the low-dose sedatives, a profound transformation had taken place. The crushing weight of self-doubt, the terrifying belief that she was slowly losing her grip on reality, completely evaporated. It was replaced by a quiet, burning clarity. She was not crazy. She was hunted. And you are the bankroll he thought he could discard, Maya replied, her voice steady and surprisingly strong. The two women stared at each other for a long moment. Then, the invisible wall between them simply collapsed. The hostility melted into a shared, profound understanding of the deep violation they had both suffered. They were not rivals. They were survivors of the exact same predator. Sloan reached into her leather bag and placed a thick stack of manila folders onto the rustic coffee table. I pulled every single black file from his Zenithar Logistics vendor profile, Sloan stated, spreading the documents out. Financial ledgers, ghost accounts, and the official event itinerary. He is scheduled to hand over the finalized master drive this coming Friday at precisely 10 in the morning. He will be standing in front of 200 of our top executives, shareholders, and media representatives. He believes the moment he plugs that drive into our mainframe, he walks away with millions and zero consequences. He needs the absolute final version of my source code to make that presentation work, Maya said, leaning forward, her eyes scanning the complex event schedule. He only has 95% of it. The core predictive algorithm, the brain of the entire software, is still locked on my personal encrypted server. He has been begging me for it all week, playing the role of the supportive husband to coax it out of me. Then we give him the exact thing he desires, I interjected, leaving the hearth to join them at the table. We supply him with the very noose he needs to orchestrate his own ruin in front of the largest audience possible. Maya turned to me, a small, dangerous smile touching the corners of her mouth. She reached for the secure laptop I had provided her earlier that morning and opened the lid. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in months, the heavy fog of the sedatives was completely gone from her eyes. She was back in her element. If I give him the final build, he will undoubtedly verify it before the presentation, Maya explained, her fingers flying across the keys with blinding speed, lines of complex code reflected in her dark eyes. But he is not a programmer. He is a parasite. He will only check if the interface boots up and runs a basic diagnostic. So, I am going to write a ghost protocol, a hidden payload buried so deep within the foundational architecture that his hired tech lackeys will never find it. We watched in awe as Maya orchestrated her digital vengeance. She was weaving a trap made of pure logic and mathematics. What exactly will it do? Sloane asked, genuine respect evident in her tone. It is a time-delayed logic bomb, Maya answered, hitting the enter key with a definitive strike. It will remain completely dormant during his private tests, but I'm setting a geographic and network trigger. The absolute second his flash drive connects to the Zenithar corporate mainframe IP address, the payload will detonate. It will forcefully hijack the entire audiovisual system of the auditorium. It will lock him completely out of the controls. He will not be able to shut it down, restart it, or unplug it. The system will belong entirely to us. And that is when we broadcast his true legacy to the world, I finished, feeling a surge of adrenaline. Sloane walked over to the small kitchenette and found a dusty bottle of aged bourbon left behind by my colleague. She grabbed 3 mismatched glasses, pouring a generous measure of the amber liquid into each. She handed one to me, and then, with a look of profound solidarity, handed one to Maya. To the man who thought women were nothing more than stepping stones, Sloane proposed, raising her glass. May he enjoy the fall, Maya added, her voice ringing with newfound power and unwavering resolve. We clinked our glasses together in the quiet cabin. The sound was sharp, decisive, and final. The alliance was forged. Vance Sterling had spent years carefully constructing his empire of lies. Completely unaware that the 3 women he had underestimated the most were now holding the matches, ready to burn it all to the ground. By late Thursday afternoon, Maya was back inside the sprawling Seattle house, waiting in the very same living room where I had broken Vance's pride 2 nights prior. I was parked 3 blocks away in an unmarked surveillance van, a direct audio feed buzzing softly in my right ear. Maya had insisted on doing this part alone. She needed him to believe his chemical leash was still tightly secured around her neck. At exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, the audio feed picked up the sound of the front door opening. Vance had returned. He walked in with cautious, measured steps. He had stayed away for nearly 48 hours, likely nursing his bruised ego and hoping the drugs had wiped Maya's memory of my violent arrival. Maya, darling? His voice crackled over the radio, dripping with a sickeningly sweet, fabricated concern. Are you in here? I am here, Vance, Maya replied. Her voice was a masterpiece of feigned exhaustion. It trembled perfectly. Oh, sweetheart, he cooed, the sound of his heavy footsteps rushing toward her. I am so incredibly sorry about the past 2 days. Work has been an absolute nightmare. I was stressed, and I snapped at you. Have you been taking your supplements? You sound so tired. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. He was testing her. He was probing to see if she remembered the woman in the green silk robe who had pinned him to the floor. I have been taking them. Maya lied flawlessly. But my head feels so cloudy. I do not remember much from the last couple of nights. Did we have a fight? A heavy sigh of profound relief puffed over the microphone. He genuinely believed it. He believed the low-dose sedatives had successfully scrubbed his humiliating defeat from her fragile mind. Do not worry about it, my love, Vance murmured, playing the role of the benevolent protector. It is just your illness acting up. You just need to rest. By the way, Did you manage to finish compiling that final code directory I asked for? The investors are getting very impatient. The microphone picked up the subtle scrape of a drawer opening. Yes, Maya said softly. It is all on this external drive. The core predictive algorithm is completely integrated, just like you asked. Thank you, darling. You have no idea how much this helps our future, Vance said. I could practically hear the greedy grin stretching across his face as his fingers closed around the metal casing of the drive. He had it, the key to his stolen empire. He stayed for exactly 20 more minutes, offering hollow promises of a long vacation once the big deal was closed, before claiming he had to rush back to the office to prepare for the morning. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and a biting wind. Vance Sterling drove his luxury sports car toward the towering glass structure of Zenithar Logistics, looking every bit the conquering emperor. He gripped the steering wheel, relishing the smooth purr of the engine. He probably imagined the multi-million-dollar wire transfer hitting his offshore accounts by noon. He believed he had played everyone flawlessly. His wife was a sedated ghost. His mistress was a loyal, easily manipulated asset, and the tech industry was about to crown him their new visionary. He strutted through the grand lobby at 8:30 in the morning, completely intoxicated by the illusion of his impending victory. What he did not know was that Sloan and I had been inside the building since 5 o'clock that morning. Using Sloan's ultra-high clearance corporate access badge, we bypassed the lobby security guards and went straight for the central nervous system of the auditorium. It was a massive, state-of-the-art presentation hall designed to hold 300 people. While Vance was downstairs sipping premium espresso and shaking hands with board members, I was locked inside the projection control booth, perched high above the seating area. The network is officially severed from the main IT department, Sloan whispered, standing beside me as she authorized the final override command on the primary server terminal. If he tries to call the tech support desk when things go wrong, the call will route directly to a deadline. I nodded, my fingers flying across the auxiliary control board. I was linking Maya's hidden payload receiver directly into the massive 40-foot high-definition screen that dominated the stage. Once Vance plugged his drive into the podium, Maya would have absolute, unrestricted access to the entire audio-visual grid. I patched a secondary physical cable into the audio amplifier. If he tried to manually mute the podium microphone when the panic set in, it would not matter. I had bypassed the local mute switch. Every desperate breath, every stuttered excuse he made would be broadcast at maximum volume through the stadium-quality surround sound speakers. But I wanted to ensure he could not simply run away when the trap sprang. I pulled up the electronic schematic for the auditorium's heavy oak double doors. I typed in a string of administrative commands, altering the fire safety protocols. I am locking the magnetic seals on all 4 exit doors, I told Sloan, watching the indicators on my screen flip from green to a solid, unyielding red. They will only open with your specific biometric scan. The moment he steps onto that stage, he is trapped inside a glass box of his own making. Good, Sloan said coldly, her eyes fixed on the empty stage below. I want him to feel exactly how I felt, powerless. At exactly 9:45, the auditorium doors opened, and the executives began pouring in. Men and women in sharp suits filled the velvet seats, murmurs of anticipation echoing off the acoustic walls. Down in the front row, Sloan took her designated seat, her face an unreadable mask of corporate neutrality. From my vantage point in the darkened booth, I watched Vance step out from behind the velvet curtain. He adjusted his silk tie, completely blind to the crosshairs resting squarely on his chest. The countdown to his absolute destruction had officially begun. The presentation hall went pitch black precisely at 10 o'clock in the morning. A single, blindingly bright spotlight snapped on, illuminating the center of the massive stage. Vance Sterling strode confidently into the circle of light, soaking in the hushed reverence of nearly 300 of the most powerful executives and shareholders in the entire country. He adjusted the lapels of his custom-tailored suit and flashed a perfectly practiced, utterly fake smile. Up in the control booth, I rested my hands on the edge of the console, my eyes locked on his every move like a hawk circling its prey. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance began, his voice booming through the stadium-quality surround sound system. "For the past 3 years, I have poured my blood, my sweat, and my absolute soul into a project that will redefine the future of global supply chains. Today, I am incredibly proud to present to you my crowning achievement, the definitive artificial intelligence logistics platform." He paused, letting the heavy silence build the anticipation. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out the silver external hard drive. He held it up to the light as if it were a holy relic. "The future," Vance declared with sickening arrogance, "starts right now." He walked over to the sleek podium and confidently plugged the metal drive into the master terminal. He pressed the enter key to initialize the sequence. For exactly 3 seconds, the Zenithar Logistics corporate logo spun elegantly on the massive 40-foot high-definition screen behind him. Vance turned to face the audience, his arms spread wide to welcome the applause. Then, the screen violently glitched. A harsh, digitized screech ripped through the auditorium speakers, causing several executives in the front rows to clamp their hands over their ears. The crisp corporate logo shattered into a million jagged pixels. The entire screen flashed a blinding, blood red. Vance jumped, his confident smile instantly vanishing. He spun around, frantically tapping the podium mouse. "Apologies, everyone, just a minor technical hiccup," he stammered into the microphone. But the screen did not reset. Maya's hidden payload had fully detonated. The red screen dissolved, replaced by a crystal clear, massively magnified image of the tampered pill capsules I had found in his desk. Beside the image, a stark medical text box appeared, detailing the devastating psychological effects of the low-dose sedatives. The audience began to murmur, a wave of confusion rippling through the velvet seats. "Shut it down," Vance hissed, his voice echoing loudly through the hall, because I had permanently bypassed the microphone mute switch. He violently yanked the silver drive out of the terminal, but the images remained locked on the screen. The payload had already embedded itself into the mainframe. Before the crowd could process the pills, the screen shifted again. This time, it displayed the exact email threads between Vance and the 2 rival Silicon Valley tech firms. Key phrases were highlighted in bright yellow, showing him offering the exact same source code to Zenithar's biggest competitors for $2 million more. The confusion in the room instantly morphed into an explosive outrage. Shouts erupted from the back rows. The chairman of the board stood up, his face purple with fury. Vance was hyperventilating now. "This is a hack!" he screamed into the microphone, his hands desperately clawing at the podium cables. "Someone is trying to sabotage me! Do not look at that screen!" Right on cue, Sloane Kensington rose gracefully from her seat in the front row. She turned her back to the stage and faced the furious board of directors. "It is not a hack," Sloane projected, her voice cutting through the chaos like a diamond blade. "It is the truth. Vance Sterling is a fraud. He did not write a single line of that code. He is actively attempting to sell stolen intellectual property to this company, while simultaneously negotiating with our 2 largest rivals to trigger a bidding war." Vance froze, his eyes bulging as he stared down at the woman he thought he had completely manipulated. "Sloane, what are you doing?" he croaked, his voice cracking with sheer panic. "I am protecting my company from a parasite," she fired back, staring at him with absolute disgust. "And I am exposing a man who used Zenithar corporate advances to fund his 23-year-old mistress." The massive screen shifted one final time, flashing the high-resolution jewelry store security footage. There was Vance, wrapping the $45,000 diamond bracelet around the blonde woman's wrist. The auditorium erupted. It was a symphony of destruction. Board members were shouting for security. Investors were furiously dialing their legal teams. Vance backed away from the podium, his chest heaving, his perfect facade completely shattered into a million irreparable pieces. At that exact moment, I typed a single command into the booth console. The magnetic locks on the rear double doors disengaged with a loud, satisfying clack. The heavy oak doors swung open, flooding the back of the darkened hall with bright hallway light. Maya Sterling walked through those doors. She was no longer the trembling, sedated woman hiding in the dark. She wore a sharp, tailored blazer, her head held high, her eyes burning with an unstoppable fire. Flanking her were two uniformed police officers and a pair of ruthless corporate litigators carrying thick leather briefcases. "My name is Maya Sterling," my sister announced, her voice echoing through the silent, stunned hall. "I am the sole creator and legal owner of the artificial intelligence software presented today. The man on that stage is my husband. He has spent the last 6 months secretly drugging me with heavy psychiatric sedatives to induce a fake mental breakdown. Also, he could forge a medical conservatorship and steal my life's work." Vance let out a pathetic, whimpering gasp. He looked at the massive screen displaying his crimes. He looked at Sloane standing against him. He looked at his brilliant wife marching down the aisle with the police. His survival instinct finally kicked in. He bolted. He abandoned the podium, sprinting blindly toward the side emergency exit. He slammed his shoulder into the heavy metal door, desperately pushing the crash bar. It did not budge. I had sealed it tight. Whimpering like a trapped rat, he spun around and sprinted up the side aisle toward the lobby doors, desperate to escape the nightmare he had built for himself. I stepped out of the control booth, walked swiftly down the carpeted stairs, and planted myself squarely in the middle of the exit threshold. Vance skidded to a halt just 5 feet away from me. He was completely drenched in sweat, his eyes darting frantically. He looked at my face, realizing in a terrifying flash of clarity exactly who I was. "Leaving so soon?" "Vance?" I asked, a slow, dark smirk spreading across my face. I crossed my arms, blocking the only way out. "The presentation is not quite over." "Move," he begged, his voice a pathetic, trembling whisper. "Please, just let me go." "I told you to look at me very closely," I reminded him, my voice dripping with cold satisfaction. "I told you I was not the woman you could break. I am the woman who breaks you." Before he could take another step, the two heavy hands of the uniformed police officers clamped down violently onto his shoulders. They spun him around, slamming him face first against the polished wooden wall of the auditorium. The sharp, metallic click of the steel handcuffs echoing through the hall was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my entire life. They dragged him out backwards. He was sobbing, his expensive suit rumpled, his dignity completely eradicated. He was forced to walk past the glaring eyes of the executives he tried to con, past the icy stare of the mistress he tried to use, and finally, past the triumphant, unwavering gaze of the wife he tried to destroy. Maya walked up to the podium, calmly unplugged the corrupted flash drive, and dropped it straight into the nearest trash can. She owned her code. She owned her mind. She owned her future. And Vance Sterling was going to spend the rest of his miserable life locked in a concrete cell, agonizing over the fatal mistake he made in the dark. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Violet Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.